Hey, what's happening, Ken? This is Herb. I'm just reaching out to you from Fight Island. Hey, man, thanks for appreciating me and all that I do. Right here, I give you a little glimpse of Fight Island. There's a little octagon in the back over there. And we got a little beach going on here. It's nice. So there's going to be some fights coming up soon. And thanks for appreciating me. Thanks for appreciating my contribution as an athlete to the sport. My place is a referee, and I enjoy that. And protect yourself at all times. Follow my instruction. Have a good time. Hopefully, I'll see you around the scene, brother.
Herb Dean is possibly the greatest referee in MMA history. The man who is known for making the right calls in most fights is regarded as the gold standard for MMA refereeing, and he has been credited as the best by many news outlets and UFC president Dana White. But prior to becoming a UFC ref in 2004, he himself was an MMA fighter. But obviously, that career has been completely overshadowed. So how good was Herb Dean actually? Hey guys, it's Kiiyon, and today we're going to talk about Herb Dean. This was a video I really wanted to do because many MMA fans know who he is due to the many high-profile fights he refed, but I'm sure many don't know about his MMA career. So in this video, we'll take a look at that, and we'll also take a look at his career as a referee. But before we get to it, as always, shout out to the Undisputed members of my Patreon. There are a lot of perks you can get as an Undisputed or interim member. Regardless, you will get video access to the Kiiyon podcast, which is also available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Now let's get to it. Herb Dean began his MMA career on September 9th, 2001 at the age of 30. His first opponent was Randy Helmut. From the start, Herb was the aggressor as he connected with a head kick and a right hand that had Randy hurt early. Herb tried to get a hold of a guillotine before securing a rear naked choke while the two were standing. Honestly, credit to Randy for trying to get out even though the choke was deep. Regardless, Herb held on enough to force the tap, handing him his first pro win. After this, Herb became an MMA ref when he called fights for a King of the Cage event on November 1st, 2002. He came back 15 months later to fight Joe Riggs. There's absolutely no footage of this fight anywhere, so I decided to ask Herb what happened and if the stoppage was good.
So you're asking about one of my fights, Joe Riggs, great guy, beat me fair and square. I can't whine and say it was any other thing but it. Had more experience and he was a good, strong fighter. I had a lot of fun, but he got me with a big throw and dazed me and fair and square.
Following his first pro loss, he made his debut as a UFC ref. You would think he'd stop fighting after landing such a role. But 4 months later, he came back and fought Timothy Mendoza. The two immediately clinched up with Herb connecting with some knees. Mendoza tried to take the fight down, but Herb denied it and threw more knees before securing a takedown. He immediately mounted Mendoza and threw some heavy ground and pound. Herb tried to get a hold of a rear naked choke, but was unable to do it, so both men got back to their feet. He tried to suplex Mendoza, but that was not going to happen due to his size, so he ended up just spinning out. But Herb kept the pressure going by throwing punches and kicks. He eventually took the fight down where he controlled Mendoza for the remainder of the round and almost locked in an Americana. In the second round, Herb pressed forward with more kicks and punches. All were left unanswered by Mendoza. Herb took the fight down again and threw more ground and pound. The fight got back up and both men looked tired at this point, but Herb had enough to secure another takedown. After some more ground and pound, the ref stood the fight up again. That's when Herb connected with a big knee, followed by punches that forced the ref to step in. So I could imagine this being one of the best times in Herb Dean's MMA career. Not only was he coming off a win, but he was also a referee for one of the biggest MMA promotions in the world, which is why it comes to no shock that his next fight was more than 2 years later. He traveled to South Korea to fight Jung Yoo Choi. Herb opened the fight up with some kicks. He then connected with a right hand that knocked Choi down to the mat. Herb rushed in and began throwing ground and pound. This opened up a cut under Choi's eye, which stopped the fight so then the doctors could check up on it. Choi was good to go, so the fight resumed, but on the feet, which was unfair as Herb was dominating on top position. But he still found success on the feet as he continued to throw kicks. Then he attempted a takedown and got clipped with a punch on the way down. Choi was now mounted on top and attempted an Americana, but Herb was able to reverse the position. The two got back up, but Choi was taken down immediately. Herb remained on top until the end of the round. In the beginning of round 2, both men began swinging, but Choi connected with a right hand that rocked Herb and forced him to clinch. After more right hands from Choi, he got taken down. From there, Herb threw ground and pound, but for some reason, the ref stood the fight up again. The two swung wildly once more before they clinched up. This time, Choi secured the takedown and mounted Herb. From there, he attempted an Americana, and as much as Herb tried to defend it, Choi eventually locked it in, which forced a tap. 9 months later, Herb went to London, England to fight Dave Lagino at Cage Rage 22. From the start, Dave was the aggressor as he pressed forward. Herb attempted a takedown, but that was denied with ease. From there, Dave threw with a lot of volume, and this forced Herb to move backwards and throw some shots. But it wasn't enough to stop Dave's pressure. Herb attempted another takedown, and even though it was hard to secure it, he finally did and began throwing ground and pound. Herb attempted a knee bar, but was unable to lock it in. From there, he attempted a heel hook, but to no success. He remained on top throwing punches until the end of the round. It was very competitive, but unfortunately, Herb couldn't continue due to an eye injury, so the fight was stopped before going into into the second round. This was also Herb's last pro MMA fight before fully committing to being a referee. His reason being that someone told him being a fighter and a ref would be a conflict of interest. So after going 2-3 as an MMA fighter, how good was Herb Dean actually? First off, I was really impressed with his kicks. I didn't take Herb as a guy who could throw head kicks at ease. He also had some respectable power in his hands and was capable of securing takedowns. And aside from his loss to Joe Riggs, which he says was fair and square, his other loss to Jung Yoo Choi was controversial in my opinion, as the ref stood the fight up twice when Herb was on top position. This gave Choi the opportunity to take the fight down himself and secure the submission. And his loss to Dave Legino was pretty competitive before Herb had to pull out due to an eye injury. And if there's anyone I trust in stopping their own fights, it would definitely be Herb Dean. But let's say he won those fights, his record would have been 4-1, which is pretty impressive for a man who is also reffing MMA fights. But I would still give his MMA career a 5 out of 10, as we could only imagine how successful he would have been as a fighter. But that was a route he decided not to take, as he said himself that no one was going to miss him as a fighter. And that decision proved to be correct, especially with the career that he has built as an MMA referee, which is one that pays him $500,000 annually. Yeah, he definitely made the right decision. But obviously Herb didn't get there without showing the world why he was the best ref in MMA. Some highlights that he had as a referee include the fight between Frank Mir and Tim Sylvia. It was Herb's first time refereeing a UFC championship bout. 50 seconds into round 1, Mir locked up a tight armbar that forced Herb to immediately stop the fight, as he heard a snap in Tim's forearm. Even though the stoppage was protested by Sylvia, the crowd, and the doctor who said nothing was wrong, the call was then reviewed on the big screen, which showed that Tim's forearm did in fact break, but it was almost undetectable due to the camera angle. But credit to Herb for sticking with his decision regardless of the initial backlash. This call has been regarded as the greatest of all time by Dana White and many MMA fans. Another huge call by Herb Dean was in the fight between Gabriel Gonzaga and Mirko Cro Cop. Although there was some controversy surrounding his decision to stand up the fight while Gonzaga was in dominant position, that isn't remembered due to how fast Herb stopped the fight after Mirko Cro Cop got knocked out cold by Gabriel's head kick. The speed of this stoppage was crucial due to the way Mirko landed unconscious on his foot that pinned under his body in a 180-degree angle. But Herb immediately released Mirko's foot, which prevented any serious injuries. A more recent example of a good call by Herb was during the fight with Jared Cannonier and Anderson Silva. Jared threw a leg kick that dropped Silva immediately before Herb rushed in to stop the fight. Considering that Cannonier could have thrown more punches, that extra damage was avoided due to Herb's quick thinking and action. You can also say the same for when Anderson Silva fought Chris Weidman and broke his leg even worse in that fight. But once again, Herb saved him from any extra damage from Weidman. This and many more has led to Herb Dean becoming the go-to name for reffing high-profile fights. But having a resume of close to 6,000 fights as an MMA referee has to come with some controversy. And we can use Chris Weidman as an example of this when he fought Luke Rockhold. Near the end of the third round, Chris was eating a lot of ground and pound shots from Luke. Many believe the fight should have been stopped, but instead it went to the fourth round where the punishment continued before Herb finally stepped in. The damage that Weidman took in this fight could have been the reason for his following losses, as he wasn't the same fighter after this. One of Herb's most recent errors that he took accountability for was the stoppage between Ben Askren and Robbie Lawler. First off, you could say that the initial slam and ground and pound from Robbie should have been enough to stop the fight. But the real controversy was the finish by Ben Askren, who had a tight bulldog choke that forced Herb Dean to step in. Honestly, the way Robbie's arm dropped down really made me think that he went unconscious. So I would have made the same decision as Herb if I was in his position. But once Ben released the choke, Robbie immediately stood up and began to protest. Herb has also refereed fights for Bellator, and one controversial call he made was the stoppage between Georgi Karakhanyan and Bubba Jenkins. Georgie had in a tight guillotine choke and begged Herb to stop the fight as Bubba was unconscious. Now this is another hard decision to make because there was a chance that Georgie could have been lying. So Herb had to confirm himself, but that resulted in the choke being held on for longer. I can go through more examples on his controversial calls, but in general, he doesn't have as many compared to other referees, which is impressive considering how long he's been in the sport and the number of high-profile fights he's had to call. And his experience as a fighter adds even more credibility, as he has a fight IQ unlike most of these other referees who have never fought before. That's why I will give his career as a ref a 9.5 out of 10. He deserves all the credit in the world for creating a legacy in this field of the sport, which is one that is not rewarding if you think about it. One bad call as an MMA referee can easily overshadow 10 good ones, which puts these people in a position of hate more than appreciation. So credit to them for taking the role when most people wouldn't want to do it. And the job itself requires fast reaction time, which Herb definitely has, but considering the number of fights he calls in a year, there has to be days where he's not on his A game, which leads to some controversial calls. But Herb's good calls were so monumental that it set a standard on how to do the job. He has won Referee of the Year 6 times at the World MMA Awards, and that's out of 9 times they gave that award. The biggest thing I want people to take away from this video is that being the perfect ref in MMA is almost impossible to do, but Herb Dean is definitely the closest to it. My name is Kiiyon, and this is my take on how good Herb Dean actually was. Do you agree, disagree, or have something else to add? please put it in the comments down below, because I love to read it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. But that's all out for now, so I'll see you in my next one.